It is Thursday. It is the 29th of May. You're watching Arirang, Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Geun-hye. Now, just 6 days are left until Koreans head to the voting booths for the local elections. And beginning this Thursday, new opinion polls are prohibited from being released in the media as early voting starts nationwide tomorrow. Arirang News Geun-hye starts us off.
The races are tightening up with less than a week to go until the elections. Voters are in the final stages of deciding on which mayor or governor they want to represent them. The latest poll numbers show the ruling Saenuri Party has the upper hand in 6 regions, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy in 5, an independent candidate in 1, and the rest of the 5 regions are neck and neck at this stage. An opinion poll conducted by Research and Research has the incumbent mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, still in lead over his conservative rival Chung Mong-jun, but the gap has narrowed compared to 2 weeks ago. In Gyeonggi-do province, which has the largest number of eligible voters, the ruling Saenuri Party's candidate for the governor's post has a slight lead over the opposition candidate Kim Jin-pyo. A very tense race is expected in Busan, which is getting a lot of attention this time around, as independent candidate Oh Go-don is receiving great support. Voter sentiment will become more unpredictable in the following days, as from this Thursday, the National Election Commission forbids the release of newly conducted opinion polls to the media. Anything could happen in the coming days to turn these ratings on their head, as the voter tendency among different age groups and voter turnout play a big role in the actual results. For those who won't be able to vote on the actual voting day, early voting for the first time in Korea will begin Friday for 2 days at some 3,500 polling stations across the country. Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Now moving on, former Supreme Court Justice An Dae-hee's sudden withdrawal as President Park Geun-hye's nominee for Prime Minister has left her reform plans in tatters. In fact, it's expected to delay the entire restructuring process and possibly other administrative affairs. Our Choi-sun tells us more.
When President Park announced her pick for Prime Minister 1 week ago, it was considered by many as a reflection of her commitment to reform Korean society. Former Supreme Court Justice An Dae-hee's principles and integrity were highly touted upon his nomination. It was said those traits would help him carry out sweeping reforms, despite the fact that he had butted heads with the president during her campaign in 2012 while spearheading the ruling party's political reforms. But President Park's nomination quickly backfired after An was accused of receiving privileges for his previous post in the private sector. It was discovered that he made about $1.5 million in a period of just 5 months last year working as a lawyer after leaving the Supreme Court. The president, who had pledged to root out cronyism in Korean society in the aftermath of the Seoul ferry disaster, ended up nominating someone who was at the very center of it. An's surprise resignation Wednesday has dented the president's efforts to reform the government and to assuage public anger over the government's lax management of the ferry accident. The president is widely expected to take more time to make her next pick, possibly after next Wednesday's local elections. This means the much-anticipated cabinet reshuffle will not likely take place until after mid-June. It's also uncertain as to when the president will name her new security advisor and intelligence chief. And amid criticism over the latest personnel debacle, the fate of Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Ki-chun and other aides at the presidential office are also now in question. Choi-sun, Arirang News.
Now, authorities have so far been unable to track down Yoo Byung-hun, the practical owner of the sunken Seoul ferry, who remains on the run. But they have tracked down his assets, which total well over $200 million. And the prosecution has asked them to be frozen so that he will not be able to run with it. And the court has said yes. For the latest on the investigation, our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Korean prosecutors said Wednesday that they have started taking legal steps to freeze more than $200 million worth of assets held by the owner family of the sunken Seoul ferry. Yu Byung-hun, the head of Cheongjin Marine Company, which operated the ill-fated ferry, and his family are suspected of having accumulated at least $234 million worth of earnings through various crimes both at home and abroad. The Incheon District Prosecutor's Office, which is leading the case, said it has asked the Incheon District Court to freeze the assets of Yu and his 3 children to prevent them from stashing away cash or real estate holdings before trials. Yu and his 3 children, Seomna, Daegyun, and Hyukgi, are wanted on a string of corruption charges and irregularities that are believed to have contributed to the sinking of the ferry. It is all part of an effort to hold the fugitive family criminally liable for the deadly April 16th disaster. Meanwhile, a French court has rejected a request by Yu Byung-hun's eldest daughter, Seomna, to be released on bail. The process for having her extradited to Korea began Wednesday, but could take up to a year. Jimyeong-git, Arirang News.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Geun-hye, every weekday, only on Arirang.
The United States is weighing up whether to deploy an advanced missile defense system in South Korea. The Pentagon is making a fresh push to expand a U.S.-led system to its allies in Northeast Asia to counter the North Korean missile threat. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
Quoting a Pentagon official, the Wall Street Journal reports that Washington has conducted a site survey for possible deployment locations in South Korea for its Theater High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD. No final decision has been made yet on the system, which is designed to intercept a diverse range of missiles. South Korean officials have long indicated that Seoul would prefer to develop its own defenses rather than taking part in the U.S.-led system. With that in mind, the report quotes the Pentagon official as saying that the U.S. could deploy the THAAD system to South Korea for a temporary period and then replace it with another system purchased by Seoul. It could also let Seoul buy its own missile defense system. The vice chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, James Winnefeld, meanwhile, is calling for better regional missile defense cooperation between South Korea and Japan. Speaking at a seminar in Washington Wednesday, Winnefeld emphasized the importance of developing a regional missile defense system between its main allies to effectively counter North Korean threats. U.S. Congress also passed a bill last week calling on the Defense Secretary to assess the opportunities to strengthen ballistic missile defense cooperation among Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. This is raising pressure on South Korea to join the U.S.-led missile defense system. Given Seoul's reluctance to join the U.S.-led system and the development of its own missile defense system, the issue is expected to be one of top agenda items at an upcoming trilateral meeting between the defense chiefs of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. The officials are scheduled to meet this weekend on the sidelines of the Asia Security Summit in Singapore. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, a UN Human Rights Office, which aims to monitor human rights conditions in North Korea, will be set up in South Korea. The Geneva-based office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights said Wednesday that its field-based structure will be set up right here in Seoul, with the South Korean government having given approval. The decision to open the Seoul office was made after the UN Council adopted a report in March denouncing North Korea's systematic human rights violations. Now, the field office, which will be operated independently according to UN's basic principles, is expected to be set up in the latter half of this year. A new survey shows that more than half of South Koreans see North Korea as a partner of cooperation rather than an enemy. A poll commissioned by the Unification Ministry shows 58% of the 1,000 respondents said they view the North as a country that South Korea should and does cooperate with. Just under a quarter said Seoul should provide aid to North Korea, while only 13% viewed North Korea as a hostile country. Now, in regards to President Park Geun-hye's North Korea policies, 77% replied they supported her push for a trust-building process with Pyongyang. 7 out of 10 also agreed with her description of unification as a bonanza. Now, let's turn our focus to the economy. April was another bullish month for Korea in terms of its current account surplus. Now, central bank officials attribute last month's surplus to firm auto and steel exports. Arirang News' Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Korea has been posting a current account surplus every month for more than 2 years. The central bank said Thursday that the nation posted a surplus of over $7.1 billion last month. That's a tad less than the $7.3 billion surplus in March, but up by more than $2.5 billion from the same month last year. The Bank of Korea has forecast the surplus for the year to reach $68 billion. This target looks attainable considering the accumulated surplus in the January to April period that already stands at over $22 billion. Exports rose 10% from the previous year in April to more than $56 billion, helped by strong shipments of automobiles, petroleum, and steel products. But imports dropped 0.9% to $46 billion, raising concerns the nation's continuous surplus trend is mostly down to sluggish domestic demand. The strong current account surplus might also burden local exporters in that it will add additional upward pressure to the strengthening Korean won. The deficit in the service account, which includes tourism and shipping, however, widened, posting a shortfall of around $1 billion last month compared with a deficit of $650 million in March. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A chronic problem for the Korean economy is its snowballing household debt, and the average rates on those household loans in Korea hit an all-time low in April. The Bank of Korea says that the average rate for new loans for households was just over 4%, which is down slightly from the previous month. Now, that is the lowest it's been since 1996, when the central bank first started to compile data. The average lending rate for corporate loans came to 4.5% in April, down 0.06 of a percentage point. Now, meanwhile, the average central bank loans, or the rate for household loans, remained unchanged. Deposit rate unchanged at 2.6% last month from the previous month. The global growth outlook has taken a step backward, it looks like. The Korea Institute for International Economic Policy has revised down its forecast for the world economy to 3.4%, citing a growth slowdown in emerging markets. That's a dip of 0.2 percentage points from the Institute's earlier growth outlook in October. The Institute predicted the global economy to grow 3.3% in the first half of the year, and then 3.4% in the second half. It attributes its downgrade to an expected growth slowdown in emerging economies like China, Russia, and Brazil. It also forecasts that China will not be able to achieve its growth target of 7.5% this year. However, there's good news on Korea's construction firms front. They have won nearly $31 billion worth of overseas orders so far this year. Seoul's Land Ministry and the International Contractors Association of Korea say that's up 33% compared to the same period last year. It's only the second time for the amount to top the $30 billion mark in the first half of the year. The first time was in 2010, but given that was when Korea's $20 billion nuclear power plant deal with the United Arab Emirates was sealed, industry officials say this is essentially the first time the amount has really topped the $30 billion mark before the end of June. The government attributed the increase to local companies winning huge projects in countries like Kuwait and Iraq. Now, on a different note, the global war between Samsung and Apple has largely been waged on the smartphone battlefield. But Samsung's latest product, a gadget for your wrist that promises to keep your health in check, may just represent the first shot in another looming battle. Here's our Yudian with an explanation.
It looks much like the Galaxy smartwatch, but this wristband called a SIM band is what Samsung calls a health platform to rule them all. Readings for heart rate, blood flow, hydration level, and the amount of CO2 in your blood can all be obtained when different wavelengths of light are beamed onto your skin from the device. It can also gather data from non-Samsung health trackers as well, using cloud-based software. Samsung unveiled the SIM band in San Francisco this week, just days before Apple is expected to detail plans for its own health data platform. It's a signal that the smartphone battlefield may now begin to extend to the mobile healthcare device sector. And it's not just global tech giants, but also mid-sized firms that are jumping in. This was evident at Asia's biggest healthcare congress that kicked off this week. Take this portable heart monitor, for example.
The device can send the collected data to your smartphone via Bluetooth. You can then send it to your doctor directly.
This medicine dispenser is useful for patients who often forget to take their medicine.
Pharmacists have information that you take the right pill at the right time, and also is the patient send back the information about the compliance.
Experts say the demand for such mobile health devices will continue to rise.
Since people live longer, there's a greater desire to take care of their health themselves. As there is a lot of data made available through different sensor technologies, there is naturally a rise in businesses that provide health services utilizing that data.
Yurian, Arirang News.
Let's now move on to some very welcome news for the nation's farmers, especially. Korea has regained its status as a nation free of foot-and-mouth disease. The Agriculture Ministry says its efforts to contain and prevent outbreaks since 2011 have been recognized by the World Organization for Animal Health. 3.5 million livestock, remember, were culled in Korea after a foot-and-mouth outbreak at the end of 2010, and there have been no reported cases of the viral infection since that situation was brought under control. The World Organization for Animal Health has also declared Korea as being safe from mad cow disease, goat plague, and African horse sickness. Korean officials say the changes will help boost the nation's meat exports. A drop in private consumption is the main reason the Korea Development Institute dropped its growth forecast for this year. Now, this comes as consumers have been spending less since the ferry disaster last month. However, as we reported earlier on, Asia's fourth largest economy posted a record current account surplus in the month of April. Now, the nation's economic picture doesn't look all that clear to non-experts like myself, so let's turn to an expert for his assessment of the Korean economy today. For that, Dr. Yang Jun-suk joins me live via Skype. Dr. Yang is a professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the think tank adjusted downward its growth forecast for the Korean economy this year, and the KDI, I believe, is just one of a few institutions that have lowered the growth outlook for this country. Of course, slow consumption had much to do with it. Now, how serious or how long will this economy continue to feel the impact from the ferry disaster?
Okay, well, typically, if you have a major disaster like the Seoul incident, you will have reduced consumption for a few weeks to a few months. So I think most economists don't really expect this to run beyond the second and third quarter. But the problem is we did lose a lot of consumption in the second quarter, so that's part of the reason why we're adjusting some of the projections downwards. But I think second quarter, we will definitely feel the shock from the Seoul incident. Third quarter, maybe, but I don't think it'll go beyond that. But the year-long figures will have to reflect the fact that we did have a very weak second quarter.
But Professor Yang, on the macro side, as we just reported earlier on the newscast, the current account surplus hit a record high in April. What does that mean? A big current account surplus doesn't necessarily mean a healthy economy, does it?
Not necessarily. It could be due because the imports have fallen. I haven't seen the April figures exactly yet. I've been meaning to. But if it's due to fallen imports more than increase in exports, then that actually means that our economy is not doing as well as we think it should.
So really, how concerned should we be about the local currency then? I mean, the robust current account surplus will, of course, lend further support to the Korean won, which is, mind you, already 3.3% against the US dollar up this year.
Okay, well, we should definitely be worried that the more powerful won will hit exports. But the reports that's been coming out for the last 5 years or so mention that the Korean exports are not as affected as much by exchange rates as it used to be. I think that's partially because we moved on to higher value-added products like the smartphones, where we don't have as many competitors as we used to have in the 1990s and early 2000s. It will have an impact, but it will probably be less an impact than what we're used to.
Well, earlier on, the Korean government said it expects the financial authorities to really keep the won dollar rate at about 10.20 level. Do we expect another government intervention should that rate soar beyond that point?
I think at least for the next quarter or so, yes, because Korean government does it's partially a matter of level. It's also partially a problem of change. If it changes too quickly, that adds a lot of uncertainties, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. It'll be the uncertainty rather than the weak, stronger won, which can cause more problems. So I think they will try to slow down the speed of the appreciation. Not necessarily the appreciation itself, but maybe just the speed. So I think in the second and maybe in the third quarter, if the rates seem to fall much more below 10.20, then the government will probably intervene.
Now let's talk about global economy and its impact on the Korean economy. The slowdown in China, which of course is Korea's biggest export market, and an uneven recovery in the global economy have largely cooled investor sentiment in recent weeks. Now, do we expect the Korean economy to achieve the 3.7% target this year? I mean, in your view, Professor Yang, what's your short to long-term forecast of the Korean economy?
I think it'll come close, but probably a bit under, because when they made the projection, we didn't really fully account for unforeseen incidents like the Seoul incident. But the year is still less than half over, and the other long-term factors I think were figured into these projections. So I think it'll underperform, but not by that much.
And how large of an impact, how big of an impact is the Korean economy going to feel from the external factors, from what will be happening in China, the U.S., the recovery rates there?
Okay, well, the fact that U.S. seems to be recovering, though they're shaky at the moment, I think it'll probably be a good news. I think overall things have become a lot more stable than things were last year, so that'll definitely help the Korean economy. But I think the domestic situation has become a bit more unstable. That's partially because of the Seoul incident. I think it's also partially because of the elections. I think after the elections, we'll see how political environment in Korea settles down, and then we can get a better forecast of what the domestic part of the GDP for the remaining year will look like.
Well, Dr. Yang Jin-suk, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
And that's your business today on this Thursday. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.